Hi and welcome to the second edition of the BW Momentum Conference 2025. Today we're here with Atul Pujar from ITC. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the first question I'd like to ask you is a little bit about Gen AI. We're sort of seeing Gen AI become the next big topic of conversation, especially in marketing. But in terms of actual advertisements, in terms of actual marketing campaigns, we haven't seen generative AI being used in a very visibly impactful way. Do you think we're being justifiably cautious and aware of the way we're using Gen AI, or do you think we're underutilizing its potential?
You're right. I think Gen AI has not been used as dramatically as one would have thought. But in whether it is internal to organizations or even in creatives, a lot of Gen AI is being experimented, whether it is in the form of images, whether it is in the form of trying to understand better copies. I'm sure agencies as well as marketing teams are using Gen AI today in a much larger manner. It's still under the radar. But as you rightly said, whether it is proper core creative work or trying to push the boundaries and get Gen AI to do a lot more than what humans do, I think there is a bit of cautiousness, and maybe there is a bit of a risk also that people feel that Gen AI might just take over a lot of jobs. Maybe that could also be the reason. But having said that, I think it is something which is here to stay, and all of us have to adapt to Gen AI in some form or the other.
Do you think it would serve more as a collaborator rather than something that would end up taking over human roles?
Yeah, that's how we've seen the way digital has entered our lives, whether it was the computer or to the mobile phone or now internet in various forms. I think it has to be a collaborative way in which we learn to use Gen AI better to probably improve our skills or to improve our execution abilities, and also to reduce costs in that sense. So I think that's how the future of Gen AI would move from here on.
I see. So let's talk about marketing budgets a little bit. We've seen that marketing budgets are actually as high as they've been in like a while, but we always hear CMOs talking about how there's a lot of pressure on them to deliver a lot more with less resources available to them. So this is sort of a paradox. It's sort of contradictory. What do you have to say about that?
So I think firstly, it's a myth that marketing budgets are higher. Every year, the marketing budgets will also take a little bit of a reduction because you're trying to increase your sales and thereby look at marketing as a percentage of sales. So as a spend, it always gets lesser by the year. Also, the cost of media today in India has only exploded from what it was 20 years ago. Whether it is TV, whether it is digital, and now with all the new forms of marketing, the costs of reaching consumer has only gone up. So hence, that's always a challenge. The second big challenge in India today is that media is very fragmented. Each one in this room would have a different influencer that they follow, or a different sports star that they follow, or a different actor that they look at, or an OTT platform. So it's very difficult to get a slightly larger audience for any TG, and that makes it much more difficult to get your messaging through. And that's the reason there is that constant pressure of figuring out how best your creative is working or how best your media is working. So that pressure is always there. So hence marketing budgets are always going to be under constant stress. So that I hope that was your question.
Yeah, absolutely. So now in terms of marketing budgeting, how do you usually allocate your marketing budgets with your department? What does your media mix sort of look like?
Right. So around 5 to 6 years back, probably ATL spends, ATL which we define as TV, print or radio, which was the original traditional ATL, used to be more than 90% of the spends. Today it has come down to between 70 to 80%, depending on different brands. So then hence the balance has been shifted to digital. So close to 25%, in some cases up to 30% of spends are on digital. Again, digital started is largely allocated between YouTube and Facebook, but now we are seeing new forms of digital content also emerging. Influencers as a platform is now also eating into a small pie of the digital budget. So these are things which are evolving for sure, but yes, there is a need to increase digital marketing spends because the behavior of consumers has completely changed from watching 4 people in the house watching TV to each one watching a screen and having various options to explore. There is no way marketers can leave digital behind. They have to explore and find out the right ways of targeting consumers through digital.
You mentioned that for you, 75 to 80% of your budget still goes towards traditional marketing. I think that would be kind of surprising for our viewers, considering that digital marketing is so important and so necessary for most businesses right now. How come so much of your budget is still going towards traditional marketing?
So in core, I am from the FMCG sector. So FMCG is your typical biscuits or soaps or agarbattis that I handle. These are categories where 80% of the business comes from the kirana store.
Right.
Especially, and these are also businesses where almost the penetration of the category is almost 80-85% in rural India, where you don't have e-com, where you don't have a D-Mart or a Reliance. So the consumers are going to go to the nearest kirana store and buy your products. Those consumers are also going to watch their media on a Star TV or a Star Vijay, which is a Tamil channel. So these media platforms are still very relevant, or print is very relevant in certain pockets. So our reasoning is more dependent on the kind of allocation we have to do on with respect to our sales. However, having said that, if it has to be a Bombay or a Delhi, clearly media budgets are significantly high as far as digital is concerned. It could be upwards of 50% in some cases, 100% allocation is only digital, because these are markets where it's very easy to reach consumers using digital platforms. So it largely depends on which product, which city, and that's how the factors are determined. And at an overall level, broadly, it would be between, say, 20 to 30%, depending on the brand.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about influencer marketing a little bit, more relevant to your panel today as well. So, influencer marketing can be tricky. It's especially volatile right now. So, when you're collaborating with an influencer, you're collaborating with someone who already has a personal brand that exists on their own. What factors do you keep in mind when you're picking out an influencer to collaborate with to sort of represent your brand and to make sure that compatibility is there?
So I think the first criteria is always whether the personality fits the brand ethos. So I represent a brand called Mangaldeep, which is an incense brand. So because it's a brand which is in the spiritual and the devotional space, I would definitely choose influencers, whether they are male or female, who have that kind of a personality background. It would definitely not be, say, Hardik Pandya, for example, just to give a very random example. So those choices are firstly determined on the brand principles and the brand world that we have created. Once that guideline is set, then it's a lot more to do with how the creator wants to introduce the brand in their world, because then we don't want to probably intervene too much into their content or their style, because then it will not give us the benefit. So that's the core criteria, is how to figure out who is the person based on the ethos, and then there are all those metrics with respect to his follower count, whether the cost of that influencer merits the kind of engagement we would get. So those are metrics which then determine whom we select out of them.
So it's a lot more nuanced than just the numbers. You're not just looking at follower counts and reach and engagement. It's very important that that personality and that niche is very compatible with what you're looking for.
Right. So one is with respect to the personality, and second is also with respect to the objective. There are a lot of times we want to only do an influencer campaign in a market like Andhra Pradesh. Because there is a certain business challenge in that market, we want to specifically do something specific out there. So we would go to an Allu Arjun if it's a mega celebrity, or it could also be some of those local celebrities or influencers who have a certain reach, but they justify the kind of costs that you determine. So it would depend on the market, it would depend on various other factors, but the broad principle has to be that the personality fits the brand ethos.
Wonderful. So thank you so much for coming here today. I think we've gotten a very nice, broad and nuanced insight on how these things work. So thank you so much.
Have a nice day.